She got herself banned from the gym and used a slur doing it, and I got to watch them cut up her card. The treadmill stopped dead. 1 second I was running, watching TV, completely in my own world, the kind of checked-out cardio zone where your legs are moving but your brain has fully left the building, and the next second the belt just quit and I went straight into the controls face first, chin scraping hard across the top of the screen. There was no warning. There was no slowing down. One moment I had momentum and the next I had a mouthful of control panel. It was not a stumble. It was not a trip. It was a sudden, jarring, violent stop caused entirely by another person reaching over and yanking out the safety tab while I was mid-stride. And the person who did it? The same woman who had already been confronted by management, who had already been warned in writing, who had already put her foot on a weight machine while I was actively using it just to get my attention. Think about that for a moment. This was not a stranger who made a split-second mistake out of genuine concern. This was someone with a documented history of crossing lines, someone who had already been told by the people who run the facility that her behavior was unacceptable, someone who had been given clear and direct warnings and chosen to ignore every single one of them. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not clumsiness. This was a calculated escalation from someone who had decided that her feelings gave her the right to do whatever she wanted. Let me take you back to where things stood before this happened, because if you did not read the original post, you need to understand the full picture here. I had turned Andrea down when she asked me out. A simple, clean, polite rejection. No hesitation, no cruelty, just a clear no. What followed were weeks of increasingly uncomfortable behavior that slowly turned the gym from a place I looked forward to into a place I had started dreading. She confronted me about avoiding her, standing close enough that I had to take a step back, her voice tight and wounded like I had done something wrong by not wanting to date her. She did it again a few weeks later, this time louder. I told her she was embarrassing herself, which I meant sincerely and which I stand by completely. She then put her foot on the weight stack of a machine I was using, literally planting herself into my workout, which caused me to drop the bar suddenly and slam the weights down with a crash that turned heads across the whole floor. After I reported that to management and they spoke to her, she came back up to me, asked me out again like the conversation with staff had simply not happened. We argued briefly in hushed and frustrated tones, and she told me I needed to grow up. That was the last thing she said to me before the treadmill incident. I want you to sit with that for a second. After all of that. After being warned by staff. After causing a safety incident loud enough to stop strangers mid-rep, after being told directly, clearly, and more than once that I was not interested. She still came back. She walked up to a treadmill where I was clearly in my own world, headphones in, eyes forward, giving every possible signal that I was unavailable and uninterested, raised her voice when I did not respond, and then physically interfered with a piece of moving exercise equipment while I was running on it at full speed. I went to the front desk immediately, heart pounding, chin throbbing, adrenaline making my hands shake a little, and Andrea followed me there, which honestly says everything you need to know about her self-awareness in that moment. She did not go to the locker room. She did not sit down and collect herself. She did not leave the building. She followed me to the desk and tried to talk over me while I was mid-sentence explaining what had just happened, her voice climbing over mine like she had somehow decided she was the aggrieved party here. The woman working at the front desk told her firmly to be quiet and wait her turn, and that took a level of composure I am not sure I would have managed standing in her shoes. When it was Andrea's turn to explain herself, she said I had been staring into the middle distance like I was in some kind of fugue state and she thought I was having a medical episode. That was her explanation. She pulled the emergency safety tab out of a moving treadmill, sending me lurching face first into the control panel, because she thought I looked a little zoned out. Not because she saw me seizing. Not because I had collapsed. Not because I had called out for help. Because I looked like I was spacing out on a cardio machine, the way literally every person who has ever run on a treadmill looks at some point. She did not tap me on the shoulder. She did not say my name. She did not step around to the front of the treadmill and wave her hands. She did not alert a staff member. She grabbed the safety tab on a running treadmill while I was running on it and yanked it out. I genuinely cannot believe that was her defense. I have turned that moment over in my head many times since it happened, trying to find some angle from which it makes sense, trying to imagine a version of events where that explanation is even remotely credible, and I keep coming up empty. There are a dozen things a person does before they grab a safety tab. You call someone's name. You wave. You get a staff member. You tap them on the arm. Any of those things would have taken the same amount of time and zero of them would have sent someone flying into a control panel. She chose the most physically dangerous option available to her and then stood in front of a front desk employee and said she was just worried about me. The audacity of that is still genuinely difficult to wrap my head around. The front desk employee asked for Andrea's membership card. Andrea did not want to hand it over, and you could see the calculation happening in real time, the brief flicker of refusal, the weighing of options, the deeply uncomfortable body language of someone who had just realized they had pushed too far but still could not bring themselves to fully own it. The front desk employee told her plainly that if she did not hand it over she would be banned on the spot, no further discussion. Andrea gave up the card with the energy of someone doing a massive favor, and was told she was suspended for 1 month. 1 month. For causing a physical injury to another member after a documented history of harassment that management had already intervened on. And then Andrea opened her mouth again. She got into an argument with the front desk employee, the same woman who had been measured and fair through every second of that interaction, and that argument ended with Andrea using a racial slur. A full, deliberate, ugly slur aimed directly at the woman who had just shown her more patience and professionalism than she had any right to receive. The 1-month suspension became a permanent ban before the sentence was even finished. They took her card and cut it up right there at the desk. Let me just stop here for a second. She really said a racial slur. Over a gym membership. After causing a safety incident. After weeks of documented harassment. That is the kind of person we were dealing with this whole time, and it reframes everything that came before it in the most clarifying possible way. Looking back now, I think about the full arc of what happened with Andrea. It started with a rejection. A perfectly normal, cleanly delivered rejection with no mixed signals and no ambiguity attached to it. I had not led her on. I had not given her reason to believe the answer might change. We had ordinary gym interactions, the kind of small talk you have with someone you see regularly in a shared space, and she asked me out and I said no. That should have been the end of it, a small awkward moment that fades within a week. Instead, it became weeks of escalating behavior that pulled in management, disrupted other gym members, and eventually ended with me physically injured on a piece of cardio equipment in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. What strikes me most is how every single intervention made things worse rather than better. She was confronted by management and came back angrier, like the conversation had confirmed some story she was already telling herself about being wronged. She was warned and came back more aggressive, like the warning had given her something to push against. She was given a final chance at the front desk after injuring me and responded with one of the ugliest things a person can say to another human being. There was no version of restraint or careful de-escalation that was going to reach her, because the problem was never about finding the right words or the right tone. The problem was that she had made a decision, somewhere along the way, that the rules and boundaries that apply to everyone else simply did not apply to her. The gym employee who dealt with all of this deserves to be acknowledged directly and without reservation. She stayed calm when Andrea talked loudly over me at the front desk. She gave Andrea a fair and genuine chance to explain her side of the story. She tried to resolve the situation with a 1-month suspension, which was honestly more measured than Andrea deserved given everything that had already been documented. And in response to that professionalism, that fairness, that genuine attempt to handle things by the book, Andrea hit her with a racial slur in front of other members and staff. I am genuinely glad the permanent ban happened, but I am also genuinely sorry that woman had to absorb something that hateful just to make it happen. Here is where I land on all of this. I said Andrea was embarrassing herself months ago and took real heat for it at the time. People called it rude. People asked whether I had provoked her somehow. I questioned myself too, honestly, because I did not want to be the kind of person who says something cutting to someone who is already stinging from a rejection and convince myself it was justified. But watching how everything unfolded from that point forward, I was not wrong. I was not even close to being the asshole in this situation. Andrea did not need a gentler approach from me. She did not need more patience or more carefully chosen words. She did not need someone to sit with her and validate whatever she had convinced herself was happening between us. Every soft response she received, from me and from management, she treated as an opening to push further, as evidence that there was still ground to be gained, still some version of the outcome she wanted that was within reach if she just kept pressing. The pattern was consistent from the very beginning. The moment any response left room for interpretation, she moved into that room immediately. The only language that registered was finality, and even then it took a permanent ban to deliver it clearly enough that she could not reframe it. I do not feel good about the way it ended, and I want to be clear about that. Watching them cut up the card felt satisfying in the moment, a clean and final punctuation mark on something that had dragged on for far too long. But what happened to get us there was ugly and unnecessary. A gym employee got racially harassed because Andrea could not accept being told no by a stranger who owed her nothing. That is not a happy ending. That is just the least bad version of how something genuinely bad concluded. What I can say is that I reported when I should have reported, I stayed calm when I could, and I did not let self-doubt talk me out of protecting myself when it mattered. That part one would do the same way again without hesitation. He opened our relationship to chase a coworker and got 0 dates. I got 500 likes in a week. She checked her phone and went completely still. Not the kind of still where someone is surprised. The kind of still where someone is trying to decide how to respond to something they were absolutely not prepared to see. Because my boyfriend, the same man who sat across from me 6 months ago and proposed opening our relationship, had just gone through my phone. And what he found on it had destroyed him. But here is the thing. He built the door. He opened it. He handed me the key. And apparently, he never actually expected me to walk through it. Let me give you the full story from the beginning, because the details here matter enormously. My boyfriend and I had been together for just over 3 years when he brought up opening the relationship. We were both 37, both independent, both stable. The relationship was genuinely healthy by any reasonable measure. We had built something real together, the kind of steady, comfortable life that most people spend years trying to find. So when he raised this idea, it was not coming from a place of obvious crisis. It felt like it came out of nowhere, and honestly, it kind of did. I remember sitting there watching his mouth move and feeling like the floor had shifted slightly under my feet, not because I was devastated, but because nothing in the previous 3 years had given me any reason to expect that conversation. He framed it as wanting to go on dates and potentially sleep with other women, while making clear I would have the same freedom with other men. He told me if I was ever uncomfortable we could close things back up. He also set a rule that we would not discuss who we were seeing or what we were doing. No updates, no check-ins, no full disclosure. What happened outside the relationship stayed outside the relationship. I had never been in an open relationship before. I had real questions. I took time to think and do my research. I read about relationship structures and communication styles and the difference between jealousy and insecurity. I talked to a few people I trusted. And eventually, I agreed. Not impulsively. Not out of fear of losing him. I agreed because after sitting with it honestly, I decided I was curious enough to try. So I downloaded a dating app. Within a few days I had over 500 likes. That number kept climbing. I started matching, chatting, arranging dates. I was going out roughly once or twice a month, and there were a few people in similar relationship dynamics that I had started seeing more regularly. What surprised me most was how much I genuinely enjoyed it. There was something unexpectedly freeing about it, about being seen by new people, about conversation that had no history and no weight, about rediscovering parts of myself that had gone quiet inside a long-term relationship. I had gone in skeptical and cautious, and I came out of those early months feeling lighter, more confident, and honestly more present in my own life than I had been in years. I was not looking to replace anything. I was not running away from the relationship. I was just, for the first time in a while, fully showing up for myself. Meanwhile, my boyfriend had proposed this whole arrangement because he wanted to pursue a younger woman at his workplace. He had framed it to her as a date. She interpreted it as a work lunch. He walked away from that interaction having accomplished nothing, embarrassed and quietly crushed in the way that only happens when you misread a situation you were completely confident about. And apparently that was the highlight of his 6 months. No one else matched with him. He went on a few rough dates, the kind where the conversation dies early and both people know within the first 10 minutes that nothing is going to happen. He slept with no one. He had proposed this entire restructuring of our relationship for a single specific purpose, and that purpose had laughed in his face without even realizing it. And rather than sitting with that privately, processing it, or simply letting it go, he eventually noticed my phone notifications sitting on the counter and decided to go through my messages without my permission. He read everything. The app. The conversations. All of it. And then he blew up. Oh, the audacity. This man opened the relationship, set the rules, told me not to share details, and then went through my phone to find out what he told me not to tell him. And then got mad about it. He admitted the whole thing. He told me he had specifically opened the relationship so he could pursue this woman at work, and his plan was to see if things worked out with her well enough that he could leave me for her. That was the actual motivation. Not exploration, not growth, not some genuine interest in a new relationship dynamic. He wanted an exit ramp. He wanted to see if he could trade up. He had sat across from me, looked me in the eyes, and handed me what sounded like an invitation when it was actually a test he expected me to fail quietly while he pursued someone else. And because that did not work, and because no one else wanted him either, he came home and decided the problem was me. He demanded we close the relationship immediately. He called me names. He acted as though I had done something wrong by doing exactly what he told me I was allowed to do under the exact rules he set. I told him we should probably just end things or at minimum take a break. He was outraged. His voice had that particular quality of someone who genuinely believes they are the injured party in a situation entirely of their own creation. He could not understand why I was not simply agreeing to close the relationship and move forward as if none of this had happened. Here is what I think was actually going on in his head during all of this. He proposed the open relationship as a private side door he could slip through while keeping me waiting at home. He never genuinely believed I would be successful at it. He probably assumed that I would either say no and lock him out of the idea entirely, or say yes and struggle while he had his fun. He pictured me sitting home on weekends wondering where he was, maybe feeling small, maybe becoming more grateful for his presence over time. The possibility that I would say yes, thrive, and have a full social life outside of him seems to have genuinely never crossed his mind. And when reality landed, it landed hard. Because the version of me he had been imagining was not the version that actually existed. I walked home contemplating whether to end things completely, and honestly I think I already knew the answer before I reached my front door. The relationship he wanted to have with me was one where I existed as a safety net. He wanted someone to come home to while he tried his luck elsewhere. When that luck did not come through, he wanted to snap his fingers and have the safety net spring back into place like nothing had shifted. That is not a partnership. That is a convenience arrangement dressed up in the language of a relationship. His behavior after I left confirmed everything. Blowing up my phone, calling me names, acting like I owed him compliance after everything he had confessed. He did not apologize for going through my phone. He did not apologize for planning to leave me. He did not sit with any discomfort or show any self-reflection. He just wanted control back as fast as possible, because control was the only thing that made his situation feel bearable. Here is my verdict, and I am going to be completely direct about it. She is not the asshole. Not even slightly. Not even in a generous reading of this situation. She agreed to an arrangement he proposed, followed the rules he set, and had the audacity to be successful at it. Everything she did was within the terms he laid out. Everything he did, the secret motive, the phone snooping, the name-calling, the demands, was a betrayal of the agreement and of her trust. The most telling moment in this entire story is not the phone. It is not the confession. It is the fact that he thought opening the relationship and then getting no dates meant she owed him a reset button. As if her freedom was only ever meant to be theoretical. As if the whole arrangement was designed to give him room to move while she stood still. When reality flipped that script, he could not handle it for a single conversation. She should break it off. Fully. Not a break, not a slow fade, a clean and complete end. Because what he showed her is not a momentary lapse in judgment. It is his actual value system. He is someone who tried to use her as a backup plan, failed, and then expected her to be grateful he came back. She deserves someone who wants her as the first choice, not the fallback. Walk out, close the door, and do not look back. Tell me in the comments which story hit harder for you today, and if you made it this far, a like and subscribe would genuinely mean a lot.